With 100 years of Brownlow Medal history already in the books, I thought now would be a perfect time to look back on every single count and briefly sum them up. If you don't know what the Brownlow Medal is, it is the AFL's equivalent of the MVP award, voted on after each game by the umpires who, since 1931, have given votes to 3 players in a 3-2-1 format each game, which is a system I'll talk about in a future video. It's garbage, spoiler alert. The medal was named after Geelong administrator Charles Brownlow, and first awarded shortly after the first Sandover Medal in WA in 1924. Just saying, SA had been doing this concept for decades by this point, but anyway, this is the history of the Brownlow Medal. 1924, Edward Greaves Jr., Geelong. The first medal wasn't even that close. Greaves got BOG in half of his 14 games, honouring Brownlow's legacy by winning whilst playing for his favourite club. 1925, Colin Watson, St Kilda. Watson polled more this year than all other Saints across 24 and 25. In fact, in modern votes, he got 27 in a 16-game season, which is insanity. 1926, Ivor Warren Smith, Melbourne. Ivor was the first player from a good team to win. He even won a flag for his trouble, and he'd be the last player to do that for, about 12 months. 1927, Sid Coventry, Collingwood. Much like Ivor, Sid was a talented ruck who skippered his side to a flag, winning Chaz for himself along the way. He was quite an inspirational leader. In fact, he was the skipper of the four-peat Collingwood side from 1927 to 30. Sensational player. Still, might not even be the best player in his own family. 1928, Ivor Warren Smith, Melbourne. The first multiple winner, Warren Smith also captain-coach, starting from the year he won Brownlow No. 2, making him the first person to win a Brownlow whilst doing that. 1929, Albert Collier, Collingwood. A mighty centre-half back, Collier became the first defender to win. This was the closest count so far, but wouldn't stay so for long. 1930, tie between Harry Collier, Collingwood, Alan Hopkins of Fitzroy, and Stan Judkins of Richmond. Depending on when this releases, the 1930 Brownlow video will either be out soon or already out, but needless to say, this was a shit show and completely changed the voting system as a result. 1931, Hayden Bunton Sr., Fitzroy. Hayden Bunton, the only VAFL player to average over a vote per game. I'll explore his career in full later down the line, but suffice to say, he was brilliant. Get the second win up here too. Yep, while the counts were close, he was just too good. Fast, skillful, evasive, elite. 1933, Wilfred Chicken Smallhorn, Fitzroy. Chicken Smallhorn would later become one of the founders of the Changi Football League in the World War II Burmese prison camp of the same name, and thus fathered the Changi Brownlow, which was the MVP of that competition, won by Peter Chitty, formerly of St Kilda. He was called Chicken because his mum could never catch him when he was a boy, not because he was scared or anything. In fact, he was a lot braver than that name suggests. 1934, Dick Reynolds, Essendon. An interesting count, this one. Bunton was 1 vote behind Reynolds coming up to the final round and played a great one. However, some cheeky words to the umpire about how good his performance was, allegedly, meant that he got nothing. 1935, Hayden Bunton Sr., Fitzroy. Offsetting 1934's disappointment, Bunton became the first man to win 3 medals the next year. He also won 3 Sandover medals in WA once he moved in 1938. What a freak. 1936, Dennis Ryan, Fitzroy. Unbelievably, this was Fitzroy's 5th Brownlow in 6 years, and it really should have been 6 from 6, this time going to a second-year centre-half back. Despite that record, Fitzroy didn't make a single finals appearance in the entire 1930s. Staggering. Can't wait to tell their story, but that's a fair while away yet. Start of 2026. Stay tuned. 1937. Dick Reynolds, Essendon. Dick reigns supreme. He actually played with 2 different numbers in this season because he left the Guernsey at home one time. Anyway, this count wasn't really close. 1938. Dick Reynolds, Essendon. Reynolds does a Bunton by not only winning the medal in subsequent years, but beating out Stan Spinks by a single vote to get his third win. Yeah, I don't know who Stan Spinks is either. 1939. Marcus Whelan, Collingwood. Whelan was a great utility with pace and a piercing stab kick. He ended his career by choosing to leave the Pies for the St Kilda Seconds team. Bizarre. 1940. Tie between Des Fothergill, Collingwood, and Herbie Matthews, South Melbourne. Another new decade, another Brownlow farce. This tie couldn't be broken, as both players had polled the same amount of 3s, 2s and 1s, causing the system to change again. For the only time until the 1980s, both men got to keep their medals. While Matthews was the first winner for South, this was Collingwood's fifth. They would then, rather like the club's future premiership drought, fail to win for 32 years, by which time the Swans had won 7. The Brownlow is weird. 1941. Norman Ware, Fitzroy. Ware beat Matthews by a single vote to secure the last Brownlow before the award went into recess due to World War II. It was also the first medal for any expansion team, if you don't count Judkins, and I really kinda don't. From 1942 to 1945, no Brownlow medals were officially awarded. The Changi Brownlow was the only MVP medal awarded during this time. According to C.C. Mullen's Champions of the Colony, Jack Dyer was the best player in 42 and 43, Norm Smith in 44, and Jack Graham, no not that one, in 1945. None of these men won a Brownlow medal in these or any other years. 1946, Don Cordner, Melbourne. This one caused some outrage as the Carlton duo of Deacon and Howe robbed each other of votes while Cordner dominated his own team's tally in a narrative that would play out verbatim for almost every year of this wretched medal's existence. 1947. Bert Deacon, Carlton. Deacon would win the next year, although that began the common sight of Harold Bray coming so close in Saints teams that were radioactively bad. 1948. Bill Morris, Richmond. The only other notable thing about Bill Morris aside from his Brownlow win is that he married the one wealthy Adelaidean before a rough separation led to him control-Zing himself at only 39. If you're going through a rough patch, talk to someone. Stay safe. This can happen to anyone. 1949. Tie between Cole Austin of Hawthorn and Ron Clegg of South Melbourne. Ron Clegg originally broke Hawks' hearts, claiming the medal on tiebreaker to rob Hawthorn of their only prize of any merit in their first quarter century of VFL football. Even worse, a board split meant Austin left the Hawks immediately afterwards. Simpler times when the Hawks were garbage. 1950. Alan Ruthven, Fitzroy. This guy was weird. He wanted to be the next Hayden Bunton. Unfortunately, that spot was already filled. Plus, he dressed so weird, everyone called him the Baron. Great little rover, though, despite his eccentricities. 1951. Bernie Smith, Geelong. You've got to be good to win a Brownlow from a back pocket, and that's what Smith did. If only the Democrats had voted for Bernie like the 1951 umpires did. So based. Ron Clegg came second in what was a tight count. 1952. Tie between Roy Wright of Richmond and Bill Hutchison of Essendon. This count's kinda sad. First, Bray got robbed, again, naturally. Second, Hutchison lost this medal to Wright on tiebreaker and had died by the time the league decided to give retrospective medals to all tied winners in 1989, making him the only man to be awarded a Brownlow posthumously. Hutchie made the whole thing less sad by winning outright the next year, though. Oh yeah, better announce that. 1953. Bill Hutchison, Essendon. 1954. Roy Wright, Richmond. And bizarrely, Wright won his own outright the next year, doing so with a record vote tally of 29 and winning margin of 10. Bit overkill if you ask me. 1955. Fred Goldsmith, South Melbourne. Goldsmith won his medal at full back in 1955, the only man to do so. In 1956, the Swans decided to play him at full forward. Okay. No wonder they had a 72-year title drought. 1956. Peter Box, Footscray. Box was almost killed in a motorbike crash in 1952, so to win this was a huge effort. He remains the only premiership-winning Brownlow medalist bulldog, at least until Bontempelli stops getting robbed, fingers crossed for the Bont, this year. 1957, Brian Gleeson, St Kilda. Take a look at my Saint series for more on their bizarro 1950s Brownlows. Cliff notes: Gleeson won his and got an injury so bad he never played again after his win. 1958, Neil Roberts, St Kilda. Roberts won his medal as an amateur, earning his first ever money from sport thanks to the Brownlow prize money. 1959, tie between Vernon Howell, St Kilda, and Bob Skilton of South Melbourne. And poor Vernon Howell lost on a tiebreaker, meaning he didn't get his medal for 30 years. Skilton won his first that year, one of the smoothest, silkiest players in the history of the game, and yet he wasn't even the best Bob to play for South Melbourne. At least, not yet. 1960, John Schultz, Footscray. Thanks to Fitzroy's Murray and Clark stealing votes off each other, Schultz snuck home. He was also an amateur and, in fact, retired at 29 to help with the family fruit shop. You may remember him as the only living being to hand the Bulldogs a premiership cup. 1961, John James, Carlton. John James went to the same school as Brian Gleeson, which is weird. He also retired at 29, only 2 years after his Brownlow win. The 60s were so strange. 1962, Alistair Lord, Geelong. Lord was the true one-season wonder. He got 5 votes either side of his 28-vote 1962 season and 4 votes in his final 3 seasons before retiring at 26. 1963, Bob Skilton, South Melbourne. Skilton beat Polly Farmer to get his second medal in what was a bit of a surprise considering Polly already had a massive reputation from being easily the best player in Western Australia at the time. 1964, Gordon Collis, Carlton. In 1963, Collis went to his optometrist complaining of blurred vision. He got contact lenses and immediately won the Brownlow from centre half back, remaining the last defender to do so. He got 27 votes, 22 more than any other season he played. The 60s was so strange. 1965, tie between Ian Stewart of St Kilda and Noel Teasdale of North Melbourne. Vote stealing? Nah, not for Ian Stewart. Despite fellow Tasmanian Saint Baldock coming close, Stewart won on a tie-break 6-3 vote performances to Teasdale's 5. Teasdale would never poll more than 9 votes in any other season and would have to wait until he was in his 50s to actually win the medal. Some have all the luck. 1966, Ian Stewart, St Kilda. While Noel cried, Stewart won another medal and a premiership for St Kilda. Astonishing. He and Baldock again combined for an outrageous number of votes, but Stewart pulled margin over everybody. I don't know how he did it, but he was just that good. 1967, Ross Smith, St Kilda. Proving that Saints Brownlows seem to come in threes, the reliable but unremarkable Ross Smith got a medal. He was very reliable. 1968, Bob Skilton, South Melbourne. Fun story about Bob Skilton's 1968. After getting belted in successive weeks, he got his picture in the paper with 2 black eyes. This was seen as antithetical to football somehow, enough that the Anti-Football League, a real thing, gave him their version of the Brownlow as someone who did the least for football's cause. He was the only footballer to win it, let alone the only guy to win a Brownlow the same year. Really weird stuff. 1969, Kevin Murray, Fitzroy. He finally did it. In a close count, the 31-year-old Murray, who'd come so close in recent years, limped over the line in a hugely popular win. Fun fact, upon his retirement, he'd played in the most losses in senior footy history to that point. Only Cade Simpson and Woodville's Ralph Sewer have beaten him since. 1970, Peter Bedford, South Melbourne. This was Swan retribution, as Bob Pratt was famously hit by a Bedford truck on the eve of the 1934 Grand Final, so it was about time something good related to Bedfords happened for the Swans. He's the only person to win a Brownlow and a Sheffield Shield in the same year, and no one talks about that anywhere near enough for my liking. 1971, Ian Stewart, Richmond. If you'll remember from this video, Stewart was traded for a broken nutcracker and promptly won Brownlow number 3, currently the 4th and final man to do so, assuming Lachie Neale doesn't get over the line. He does not deserve to be in this club, but anyway. St Kilda, well, they lost the grand final that year without him. Interesting. Hope they never trade a midfield star and lose a grand final that year again. 1972. Len Thompson, Collingwood. Thompson is quite rightly remembered as a legend, but he missed the easiest chance in the 1966 grand final. If he gets that and Collingwood win, are St Kilda kept alive in the 1980s? Probably not, so thanks, Len. 1973. Keith Gregg, North Melbourne. Actually, as a matter of fact, let's just skip ahead a bit. 1974. Keith Gregg, North Melbourne. Do you know how good you have to be to win 2 consecutive Brownlows whilst being ginger? Greggy was insane on the wing, but his coach was like actually insane. He and Barassi actually hated each other for a while there. But they managed to get over their issues, win a couple premierships, and both go down as AFL legends, so cool. 1975. Gary Dempsey, Fitzroy. 6 players came within 3 votes of Dempsey, who started the umpire's fascination with big guys in the 1970s. He was actually burned so badly in a bushfire 8 years prior, he was told he'd never play again. He's in the Hall of Fame now. 1976. Graham Moss, Essendon. This was the first year that both field umpires gave individual 3-2-1 votes. Moss continued the ruckman love-in, then promptly shredded his knee and went back to WA. So only Bunton has more votes per game than Moss does in a VFL career that was far too short. 1977. Graham Teasdale, South Melbourne. This was the last year that both field umpires gave the etc. Teasdale shat it in, setting an unbreakable vote record just a few years after the Tigers traded him. Nice move, Richmond. 1978. Malcolm Blight, North Melbourne. The worst kept secret in football. Despite winning by only a single vote, Blight was seen as a certainty for the award, doubly so after the result was leaked before the count for the only time in the medal's history. Hell, that's probably a reason why armed security guards literally deliver the votes every year. 1979. Peter Moore, Collingwood. Gary Wilson, a teeny tiny fun-sized rover, was seen as the favourite. Sadly for the helmeted Fitzroy hero, the umps were still feeling big love for the big men, and Moore won by a single vote. He would later be almost single-handedly responsible for the abolition of runner-up premiership medals after tossing his into the crowd in 1981. Fair enough, after all, he already had 3. 1980. Kevin Templeton, Footscray. Templeton won the prior 2 Coleman medals but moved up the ground in 1980, kicking less goals but nearly doubling his disposals, which goes to prove that the umpires just love people that are closer to the midfield. He got in just in time as injuries caused a massive fall-off after that. 1981. Tie between Bernie Quinlan of Fitzroy and Barry Round of South Melbourne. At the end of 1980, the Brownlow tiebreaker rule was abolished. Just in time, as Rod Ashman almost caused a 3-way tie. Again, 2 big guys won, Quinlan being a long kicking forward, and Round being, surprise, another ruckman. 1982. Brian Wilson, Melbourne. This was a shock, and not just because Wilson wasn't a ruckman. Fresh off being offloaded to his 3rd club in 5 years, having only polled 4 votes before this, the inside midfielder convincingly won the medal, becoming the shortest Brownlow winner since Ian Stewart. 20 when he won the medal, he would only poll 29 more votes before retiring at 29. 1983. Ross Glendinning, North Melbourne. A WA export, Glendinning was a true utility, tall, agile and clever with the ball. This was the end of his massive Brownlow form. He would average 6 votes per year from this point onward, with 3 the next year. 1984. Peter Moore, Melbourne. Collingwood's inability to win on Grand Final day fractured the club so much that Moore, their skipper, left for a record transfer fee. His first year in Melbourne colours produced 24 of the 32 votes he'd earned for that club, falling off steeply until retiring at 30. And what is with the fall-offs from 1980's winners? 1985, Brad Hardy, Fitzroy. The fall-offs continue. This one's super weird. Hardy became the second rookie to win the medal after Bunton, but Hardy had 6 years of WA NFL experience prior. 22 votes matched his combined career tally after 1985 for Brisbane, Collingwood and Sydney. He was also the second medalist to suffer massive burns in his youth. Really interesting man. 1986, tie between Robert Tippier Domenica, God I forgot he won, Hawthorn, and Greg Williams of Sydney. In the closest poll of all time to that point, 2 vastly different players won. Greg Williams, smooth, silky, glamorous, and dipper, brash, unrefined, and kinda goofy, and at the tribunal so often that winning the medal was a minor miracle. Ironically, Williams got suspended the next year and became ineligible. 1987, tie between John Platten of Hawthorn and Tony Lockett of St Kilda. You like ties? In 1987 there was not only a tie for first, but for second, third, and technically fourth if the suspended Williams doesn't count. Again, 2 vastly different players won. Platten, the smooth-moving rover with a wonder team around him, and the big, fat, blubbering whale Plugger who was, as I've covered, his team's only reason that they survived the 1980s and 90s. Aside from that Len Thompson miss, obviously. 1988, Gerard Healy, Sydney. A Sydney player who'd been traded from a Vic team winning the medal. Seen that before? Unlike Diesel Williams, Healy only played another 19 games before a wrist injury ended his career. Hey, I'm starting to think the Brownlow's becoming a bit of a curse here. 1989, Paul Couch, Geelong. Paul Couch, the smiling assassin, had a 700 disposal season in 1989. No wonder he won. He'd only get within 140 of that figure twice more in his career, albeit a very good career. Few too many losing grand finals for both his and my liking, but what are you going to do? 1990, Tony Liberatore, Fitzroy. That's one for the little guys. Surviving a late scare from one-season wonder Graham Wright and fullback Stephen Silvani, the 5'4" Libber who'd struggled to break into a crap Bulldog side to that point, won, despite missing 3 games. 1991, Jim Steins, Melbourne. I think Libba made the umps mad because their love for the big guys came back in a big way. The huge Irishman became the first and currently only internationally born Brownlow winner. He credits the film The Club for piquing his AFL interest, so, thanks to Rene Kink, I guess. Also, that canonically means that Jim Steins has seen Rene Kink's ass. That's a cool fact. 1992, Scott Wind, Fitzroy. Jason Dunstall kicked 145 goals and only got 18 votes as the umps still loved them some ruckman. Amazing. The Bulldogs had 2 Brownlow medalists in their midfield for most of the 90s and made 0 grand finals thanks to David Pittman. God, that's weird. Love footy. 1993, Gavin Wanganeen, Essendon. You want a close count? You got it. This was probably the closest of any count before or since. 5 players were separated by 2 votes at the top, with 20-year-old Gavin Wanganeen becoming the first Indigenous winner, 1 vote ahead of Diesel, who had no votes in a 44 disposal final round game. 1994, Greg Williams, Carlton. Diesel got his own back in 94 though, with only Peter Matera remotely in his universe on his way to the most votes under this format since 1940, with Diesel becoming the oldest winner at the age of 32. 1995, Paul Kelly, Sydney. I thought he was more of a Melbourne boy, but Paul Kelly was amazing. He was past his best, but to win a Brownlow at 40 years old and hit the ARIA top 40 in the same year... Oh, that's the other Paul Kelly, my apologies. Footy Paul Kelly was a 25-1 outsider in the first year of legalised Brownlow betting, but had no competition, with second and third both being ineligible to win. 1996, Corey McCurt... Oh, no, James Hurd, Essendon, and Michael Voss, Brisbane Bears. And speaking of ineligible, for the first time, the Brownlow had an ineligible winner in the suspended Corey McKernan. He would have shared the Brownlow Medal with Voss and Hurd, but instead won the premiership, something the other two said they'd prefer, which was nice, but 5 years later, Hurd and Voss both had flags. Still, at least McKernan hasn't had a woefully disappointing coaching career, so one for him. 1997. Chris Grant, Robert Harvey, St Kilda. Well, Chris Grant thought McKernan made it look such fun that he decided to win the medal outright whilst getting suspended too, albeit controversially. Harvey, 1 vote back, won the medal by default. If only Grand Final Day worked the same for him. Oh, sorry Saints fans. 1998. Robert Harvey, St Kilda. Well, Harvey went supernova. He equalled the 1940 single-season votes record and won by 8 votes. Shout out to Ren and Rue both getting 20 votes, and Lockett polling 15 in his penultimate full season. This is still the last time that a man has won medals back-to-back, 26 years on. 1999. Shane Crawford, Hawthorn. Crawford knocked on the door for a while but broke through in a big way in 99. He'd never get within 4.5 disposals per game of this mark again though, but what a player he could be at his most damaging. 2000. Shane Woden. Oh god. Infamous, I believe is the word. With 12 prior votes in his career, Woe scores 24, then 4 the next year, and 17 across the rest of a career that ends by being dropped to the VFL and delisted at 29, a fate no other Brownlow medalist has ever had. Scott West, pulling godly numbers for a lowly Bulldogs, was robbed, while Essendon got a record 116 votes, getting the maximum 6 in 14 games. 2001. Jason Ackermanis, Brisbane Lions. I've gone on before about how McLeod should have at least tied for this medal, but Acker was a dynamite player. By far his most prolific vote tally, he created at least as many goals for others as the 28 he scored for himself. He was a freak. 2002. Simon Black, Brisbane Lions. So that makes 3 Brownlow medalists in that Lions midfield. Wow, no wonder they were the best team of all time, apart from Geelong. Franco came close to an upset, but Black's class and poise was so absolute he doubled his 2001 vote tally despite a reduction in outright production. 2003, tie between Mark Prosciutto, Adelaide, Nathan Buckley, Collingwood, and Adam Goodes, Sydney. A 3-way tie. This is so fun. And all different playing styles as well. We had the Ferrari of the gut-running Buckley, the Swiss Army knife that was the versatile Goodes, and the large tractor and attached agricultural equipment that was the enforcer Prosciutto, whose 4 BOGs were as many as the other 2 combined. Add to that 3 players, all past or future winners, all finishing 1 vote back, and another 3 that were 3 votes back, and you have the makings of a thrilling count. Shout out to Andrew McLeod for grabbing just enough votes off of Rue's table to make it so close. And Rue remains the only Crows Brownlow winner to this point, which... that's fun. 2004. Chris Judd, West Coast. This was the exact opposite of 2003. A combination of Judd's unmatched poise, pace and class, as well as 3 Brisbane mids all polling at least 17 votes and crowding the vote distribution ensured a storming win for Juddy. 2005. Ben Cousins, West Coast. Of course, sometimes crowding the distribution can actually work. West Coast managed the first Team 1-2 in 79 years, with their cocaine addict narrowly beating out their domestic abuser, allegedly, and that was all while their Vizzy employee scored 15. Also, Cameron Ling came 10th. Amazing. 2006. Adam Goodes, Sydney. Poor Scott West, again a game's worth of votes away from the medal. In a weird count where 2 Eagles polled 20+, Brad Johnson came 4th, 3 Port players cracked the top 10, including a rookie, and Nathan Thompson and Jono Brown also featured in the 10 best players. Goodes won his 2nd medal, remaining the last non-pure midfielder to do so. 2007. Jimmy Bartell, Geelong. Bartel missed 2 games thanks to removing his appendix and yet still cleared a logjam of players who were stuck in the low 20s, including one of his teammates. Brown again made the top 10 despite Brisbane being crap now. Weirdly, Judd got 16 votes in the first 8 weeks, a record, and then just didn't poll again. Okay. 2008. Adam Cooney, Western Bulldogs. This one's a fascinating story that I'll cover later this month. Suffice to say, pretty much no one got any votes after round 12, Matthew Richardson got robbed of the medal by his date, and the final ever 100 goal forward only got 20 votes. 2009. Gary Ablett Jr., Geelong. The rise of GAZ. Well, the actually talented GAZ, and no, the channel isn't named after him. After being the favourite in 08 and 07, shown by winning the Lee Matthews Trophy in both years, he stormed across the line by 8 votes. Also, Jono Brown tied for 4th with Simon Black. I did not realise until doing this that he polled so heavily. Put some respect on his name, please. 2010. Chris Judd, Carlton. Chris Judd became the first and only player to win while serving a suspension from the controversial pressure point incident from 2009, which carried over into 2010. Returning in round 4, he polled 15 votes in his first 5 games, not only setting up his victory but birthing the See Judd 3 votes meme. 2011. Dane Swan, Collingwood. Dane Swan broke the record for votes in a season, and his stats show why. Except they don't, because his 2010 was better, but anyway. With Sam Mitchell polling the most votes of any ineligible player despite being suspended in round 5, so why give votes to him after that, for God's sake? Swan's win was convincing in the extreme. 2012. Job Watson, I mean Sam Mitchell of Hawthorn and Trent Cotchin of Richmond. For the only time, the original winner had his medal stripped years after the fact, with Job Watson's 30-vote performance stricken out due to his involvement in Essendon's doping scandal. This turned a fair gap into a close race, with 2 Crows both within 3 votes of the win. Thanks, Danger, not only did you piss off for a net trade loss, but you cost Tomo a Brownlow. 2013. Gary Ablett Jr., Gold Coast. Ablett's move to the Gold Coast finally paid off when Steve Johnson stole enough votes from Joel Selwood to give Gaz his second, and Gold Coast's only, medal. Johnson polled 12 votes after he was suspended, by the way, by my account costing Joel 1, enough to win the medal. Fun. 2014. Matt Priddis, West Coast. This one was a goddamn joke. Disregarding the fact that Priddis didn't even make it into the All-Australian preliminary squad, Gary Ablett had one of the best seasons of the 18-team era until Brent McCaffrey decided to end Gaz's peak era and Gold Coast season at the same time. Despite missing 6.5 games, Ablett polled 22 votes. Also, Nat Fyfe was suspended for concussing himself, meaning that his shot at the medal was ruined because the MRO are idiots. Also, Steve Johnson again stole votes from Selwood and again got suspended to make the whole thing moot. Also, Lance Franklin couldn't attend as the Swans were based in Sydney, and he almost won the thing remotely. Everything bad about the medal exposed in a single year. 2015. Nat Fyfe, Fremantle. Justice. Priddis again polled well, but Fyfe outstripped him. For the first time in the AFL era, the top 9 vote-getters were exclusively midfielders, with Goldstein preventing a complete shutout. With even the Lee Matthews Trophy starting to go to mids every year, this was truly the age of the onballer. Every other position, well, good luck. You might as well try for winning a Nobel Prize. 2016. Patrick Dangerfield, Geelong. This was fun for me as a Crows fan. To be fair, Dangerfield's already high production soared, and no matter who you are, 760 touches, 24 goals, 100 tackles, 190 inside 50s, 150 clearances, 20 assists, and a double-digit T-VORP is deserving of a new single-season vote record and a 9-vote win. 2017. Dustin Martin, Richmond. All aboard the fucking hype train. More monstrous numbers, a new vote record, and thanks to Dangerfield's new record of 33 votes for a suspended player, a complete laugher of a count with an 11-vote margin so big the hype basically delivered Dusty to Norm Smith without him really doing much to earn it. 2018. Tom Mitchell, Hawthorn. This was a weird count, not least because Mitchell was far from the most valuable player with his feedy handball bullshit. Steele Sidebottom came from nowhere to poll 24 votes, only to vanish in future counts, while Angus Brayshaw, who wasn't even invited to the medal because he wasn't seen as a polling chance, came third, polling the first 21 votes of his career, and then he scored 1 vote across his next 63 games. 2019. Nat Fyfe, Fremantle. If Nat Fyfe hadn't received maybe the worst decision the MRO's ever made, he'd be a 3-time Brownlow winner. He'd be a legend. This count cemented his legacy, blowing danger out the water as new boy Tim Kelly, remember him, absorbed a huge amount of voting power. In fact, 3 sets of teammates made the top 10, paving the road for Fyfe to win comfortably. 2020, Lachie Neale, Brisbane Lions. 2020, of course, had only 17 games, so for Neale to poll 31 votes is incredible. Was he that good, though? I'd say no, but that his numbers don't suggest he was an illegitimate winner. For the first time, the top 10 was all midfielders. The umps just had a weird one, I guess. Again. 2021. Ollie Wines, Port Adelaide. What the hell is this? How does Ollie Wines, with a T-Borp only describable as pedestrian, not only defeat Bontempelli, whose impact was far greater, but do so not only with a record vote tally, but with a teammate polling 25 votes? I will never be able to explain this, especially since Wines posted a voteless 2023. Also, the top 10's all mids again, with Gawn the only non-midfielder north of 9 votes, depending on how you class Carl Amon. This put a lot of strain on the Brownlow's credibility, and it only gets worse. 2022, Patrick Cripps featuring his legal team, Carlton. Patrick Cripps joined Chris Judd in being a Carlton midfielder who won a Brownlow whilst being suspended. Cripps copped a 2-match ban in round 21 of this season for knocking Cal Archie into 2025. However, Carlton happened to hire the best QC in the world, somehow getting Cripps, and I'm presuming the whole AFL tribunal off, handjob joke, allowing Cripps to poll 3 votes in the final game to steal the medal from the teammate of the man he concussed by leaving the ground to bump his face. Oliver and Petrarca again cost each other victory by squabbling over votes, no wonder they both want to leave according to every dog shit Herald Sun article, while West Coast polled a record low 15 votes as a team, less than Dion Prestia. 2023, Lachie Neale, Brisbane Lions. So again, Bontempelli gets robbed in a new Brownlow tradition, the Harold Bray of his era. Neale gets 3 votes for a performance in which neither coach had him in their top 5 and leapfrogs the Bulldog. Justice for 2022, I guess, but poor Bont and poor Nick Dacos, whose 2-week injury break showed how farcical the medal is in terms of necessitating every player plays every game, potentially costing him a shot at victory, especially if this dogshit voting blunder is reversed. But the Brownlow Medal method, that's an issue for another time. All this is over. This is a slightly biased retelling of the broad strokes behind each Brownlow count in history. Hope you enjoyed the video, and hey, who do you think's going to win 2024? I think Lachie Neale's probably the smart money, but I reckon Bontempelli probably deserves it. Let me know who you think in the comments, and stay tuned for more in the GAZ-man's Brownlow Month.